What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, October 9th, 2018, getting into the week here, and we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today, so let's get right on into it. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions. Obviously, the big story right now, especially for people along the southern part of the eastern seaboard, is Hurricane Michael. It's at Cat 2 right now. There are concerns it could strengthen to Cat 4. It is due to hit the Panhandle tomorrow. Then it's going to go right up the coast. They've ordered evacuations. There's a state of emergency declared in Georgia as well as in Florida. And then it's going to hit the Carolinas like they haven't had enough grief this year already. With the storms that they suffered earlier. For those of you who think there's some kind of a deity or deities up there calling the shots, it's pretty obvious at this point they do not like the United States of America. They think the United States of America is doing something really bad, and they're doing something about it. Volcanoes, tsunamis, hurricanes, and so forth and so on here. But if you are in the path of the storm, take all appropriate precautions. And I know if you live in that area, you've been through this before and you know what to do. Please take it very seriously. This is going to get nasty before it's over. Okay, in other news, Nikki Haley has tendered her resignation as the United States ambassador to the United Nations. It will be effective the end of the year. And the White House is treating it as Nikki Haley only wanted to do 2 years, and then she wants to go on and do something else. But lurking in the background, there was a controversy over Nikki Haley's overuse of private jets at taxpayer expense. And she was under a lot of pressure for that. Whether that had anything to do with the resignation is unknown. But in any event, she's taking off because, you know, after you bring the world to the point of nuclear Armageddon, it's Miller time. It's time to kick back and crack open a cold one and just admire your handiwork, as it were here. And much to my unending disappointment, the backlash over the Kavanaugh confirmation is continuing. And the Democrats are continuing to throw tantrums all over the place. But the significance here is, even though Kavanaugh's interpretation of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights are not something I agree with, in particular the Fourth and Fifth Amendments, he is a constitutionalist. And that is going to swing the Supreme Court back to constitutionalism for decades. And this is really what has the Democrats in a tizzy, because President Trump now has a majority of support on that court that will back his constitutional executive actions, even if his actions are challenged with emergency appeals to the Supreme Court. And so Trump can now, for example, demand the release of the deep state documents he ordered released 3 weeks ago, and which the FBI and Department of Justice are still stalling and redacting as fast as they can here. Now, the Democrats are out there saying they're going to wait till after the midterms, and then they're going to launch a new investigation. We're going to have another investigation into Kavanaugh because of Russian collusion, or maybe it was a Chinese collusion, or basically when he was in preschool, he accidentally patted the butt of a girl standing next to him. I mean, they're really going silly. And of course, Booker is out there still talking impeachment. We're going to impeach. We're going to impeach. And they're just out there trying to say that this represents democracy in action. Well, first of all, let us remember this country is not a democracy. It is a republic with a democratically elected government. So Booker and these other Democrats are out there saying we're going to impeach him over sexual assault accusations from these 3 women and allegations he committed perjury when he denied assaulting these women, and so forth and so on. And basically saying that if the Democrats win the Senate or the House in the midterms, Cory Booker says they're going to move ahead on impeachment. Well, Mr. Booker, there's something you need to remember. Only the House can impeach. Then the Senate decides the outcome. And you have to have grounds for impeachment. And I'm sure if you have control of the House, you can go ahead and impeach. But if you don't have control of the Senate, Kavanaugh stays exactly where he is. And the liberal snowflakes in charge of our corporate social media are still out there just screaming and crying. And over at Google, one of their executives came under fire after sending this tweet to the GOP saying, "You are finished. You polished the final nail in your own coffin. Blank you all to heck." This came from Google design lead David Hogue, who added, "I hope the last images burned into your slimy, evil, treasonous retinas are millions of women laughing and clapping and celebrating as your souls descend into the flames." The tweet has now been deleted. But it just illustrates the vitriol that we are seeing from these liberal snowflakes. Okay, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Now, as for Christine Ford herself, she is fading into the sunset. She has announced she has no plans to further pursue any of the allegations against Brett Kavanaugh. This is according to her attorney. Nope, it's all gone. It's over and done with. We're not going to pursue any further. So, further showing it was just a smear job. If she really thought she was assaulted, she'd keep going. But nope, it's all over. She announced this on the same day Kavanaugh got confirmed. It's all over. Now, here's an interesting story. This came out of, well, there was this school. The Star Tribune reported there was this school teacher who posted a tweet that said, "So who's going to take one for the team and take out Kavanaugh?" Now, this is a teacher from this Intermediate School District 917's Alliance Education Center, where she worked as a special education teacher. And what's really interesting is she misspelled the tweet. This is a teacher, and she misspelled the tweet. This all happened in Minnesota. And the teacher has now been put on paid administrative leave, which means she gets to stay at home and watch TV and still get her paycheck. And it's unclear whether she's going to be investigated for making a threat against Kavanaugh. And to nobody's surprise, she's not returning calls from reporters. So, now, as you know, the anti-Kavanaugh people were out there pushing the women must be believed. There's no question they should be believed. They should never be doubted. Which brings up the fact that there is a slush fund in Congress which pays off accusers of members of Congress for sexual assault. If they will sign a non-disclosure agreement that keeps the identities of the offending members of Congress secret, they get a bunch of money. And since 1997, almost $17 million has been paid in total. So Representative Jack Bergman, who's a Republican, is saying, okay, well, if the women are supposed to be believed and never doubted, then it's time to release the names of the 264 members of Congress and their staff that have been accused of sexual misconduct, harassment, and discrimination. I agree. Let them hoist on their own petard. Because there was a very, very clear double standard where, members of Congress, we can grab the secretary and we can grab the staff and we can go after the coffee girl and they'll be paid off and I'm going to be safer. But Brett Kavanaugh, my goodness, he's been accused from 30 years ago and it doesn't matter, there's no proof. We assume he's guilty. I definitely want to see the names of the Democrats on that list made public. Well, like bad pennies, the Clintons are back. The Clintons are getting ready to launch a nationwide speaking tour And it's headlined, "An Evening with the Clintons," where they're going to go on out on a stage, and you will buy tickets from anywhere from $228 up to $700 to sit there and admire the Clintons. And they're heading for places like Las Vegas, Toronto, New York City, Detroit, Philadelphia, Boston, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C. And you will get to bask in the glory of their presence and listen to them talk and talk and talk. I'll be very honest. I wouldn't even pay 5 cents to be in the same room with the Clintons. In fact, to be honest, they'd have to pay me to be in the same room with them. Now, Hillary Clinton is out there saying that these complaints about how uncivil the Democrats have been may actually be valid. But the Democrats are willing to be civil. They'll be polite. They'll be nice. They'll be gentle, but only if they win. And Hillary's rationale is you cannot be civil with a political party that wants to destroy what you stand for. So she's basically telegraphing that if the Democrats lose the midterms, if they don't get the House of Representatives, we're going to see more violence in the streets here. Now, Hillary herself, there's some bizarre stuff going on. She was up in Boston, Massachusetts. It was 90 degrees. And she stepped out, basically. She made a public appearance at Harvard. She received the Radcliffe Award. And she was wearing a heavy coat and scarf in 90-degree Boston heat. She made this interesting comment that she would be glad to be the CEO of Facebook, given the chance, because it's the biggest news platform in the world. Now, at one of the other stops she made to rally for Democratic voters, she had another one of those strange episodes where she just starts coughing and had to get water. So there's still concern that her health may not be all that good. And you need to remember, I don't know if the Clintons still do, but certainly back when they were in Little Rock and then later the White House, they smoked. They were heavy smokers. And in fact, it got to be a joke about Bill Clinton having to duck flying ashtrays when Hillary was mad at him. So maybe it's all catching up with her. Okay. Now, John Oliver is obviously a comedian, and he's got a show on HBO. And he went on the air on his show to basically dismiss the claim that Soros was paying for the Kavanaugh protesters. He called it a baseless conspiracy theory. This is one of the reasons why I don't watch John Oliver anymore. I used to. I thought he was funny. But he's just gone so far liberal, it's just impossible to take him seriously anymore. Especially because, don't forget, at one of those Kavanaugh hearings, people got on videotape this guy handing out cash to protesters who'd made a ruckus inside the hearing room. And they've identified the guy handing out the money. His name is Vinay Krishnan. He's a social justice lawyer, and he works for the Center of Popular Democracy. Now, who funds the Center for Popular Democracy? George Soros. Krishnan is a professional paid protester who hires professional protesters. So if you're looking for work, you know, there's big bucks in being a leftist shill right now. But John Oliver is completely wrong. And I'm sure he knows he's completely wrong. But he's out there to basically tell, it's a conspiracy theory. There was no plot against Kavanaugh. You know, believe the women. Okay, interesting developments going on here. And this is not getting the coverage that it really deserves. But former FBI General Counsel James Baker is apparently coming clean to investigators. And he has basically come on out and confirmed that all this talk inside the FBI about a plot to wiretap and find a way to remove Donald Trump, it was not a joke. Now, all these people have been caught up in this mess, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and everybody else says, well, it was just chit-chat. It's not serious. There's nothing going on here. And Baker says, oh, yeah, it was very serious. It was no laughing matter. We had the Federal Bureau of Investigation plotting a coup d'etat against the elected President of the United States of America. Baker told Congress last week, then acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe was dead serious about finding some evidence to make the case for Trump to be removed from office. Now that is some very, very serious stuff. And it shows that the FBI is out of control. It thinks it's the government. And there's nothing new there. J. Edgar Hoover thought he was the seat of government when he ran the FBI. Now, do you remember the lawyer, Saak Karapetyan? He was a former member of Parliament, Russian Parliament, longtime ally of Putin. And he was linked to Moscow's alleged offer of dirt on Hillary Clinton to Donald Trump's election campaign via the lawyer who met with the Trump campaign back in 2016 at the Trump Tower meeting. And people are still trying to find out what happened there. And obviously, this Karapetyan would be a good person to talk to, except that he is dead. He died in a helicopter crash, and apparently 2 bullets were found in the pilot's body. So chalk up another one for the Clinton dead body list here. We've hit an age of wet work. We're seeing a lot of mysterious deaths, and I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon here. Remember Anthony Weiner? People used to make jokes about his last name because apparently he was in the habit of showing that off to underage young girls on his smartphone. And he lost his seat in Congress because of it, and he went to jail for it. But the good news is his prison sentence has been cut back, and he will be released next May instead of August. Now, he's currently imprisoned at the Federal Medical Center, Federal Prison in Devens, Massachusetts. And they're saying he was a model inmate, and he's getting time off for good behavior. Now, this brings us back to the laptop, which is still this area of inquiry that nobody has really looked at. We've had the IG report that had these very tantalizing hints of files and emails put into different folders, some of which were classified, State Department emails that shouldn't have been there, other information, and one folder that said crimes against children. I don't know about you. I want to know what's in there, especially given Anthony Weiner's predilection for sexting underage girls. That information should be made public. And there should be more investigations. Oh, we can't investigate Anthony Weiner. We've got to find some dirt on Trump and on Kavanaugh and on every one of Trump's supporters. We're going to dig up dirt on you. Me? At my age, I'm harmless. Now, apparently a Democratic senator actually outsourced parts of the investigation into the alleged, let's call it mythical Trump-Russia collusion, to a former Senate staffer with links to George Soros and Fusion GPS. This is coming out of the New Yorker. And apparently this unidentified senator contacted Daniel Jones, a former Senate Intelligence Committee staffer, in March of 2017 to review data regarding a possible link between the computer servers of the Trump organization and a Russian bank called Alpha Bank. Well, this is actually old news, because before Trump launched his campaign, he has business interests all over the world, including with Russia. This goes back to before Russia went from being our friend to our enemy. And when you are doing business from one country to another, linking your computers is part of the normal activity. And it doesn't mean anything suspicious. They tried to spin it. Oh, his computer is talking to Russia's computer. It must be, Beth, it must be collusion. No, it's just computers doing what computers do, networking with each other. We're going to take a break for commercials. We will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And as you know, we are now exactly 4 weeks away from the midterms. So please get on out there and encourage all of your conservative friends to vote. We've got to mobilize the base here. I realize that a lot of them have been energized by the Kavanaugh victory, but we also know that the Democrats are out there trying to mobilize their base for revenge. We want revenge. We didn't get what we want. We're going to just, wreck things here. And we obviously need to be on the lookout for election fraud, which is an out-of-control scandal in this country. Down in Oklahoma, tens of thousands of registered voters have received unsolicited applications for absentee ballots in the mail. And these absentee ballot applications are already filled out with the recipient's personal information. So a lot of people saying, what the heck is going on? Well, here's the danger. If somebody, if people just throw those out and operatives are going through the trash bin to collect them, they can send in those absentee ballots and use them to shift the election. Anyway, the Oklahoma State Election Board has been notified, but something funny is going on here. Article coming out of State of the Nation saying down in Florida, a lot of attention is being paid to the Democrat Andrew Gillum because history has generally shown that whatever party wins the Florida governor's race usually is a bellwether for who wins the presidential election. And so they're calling for the defeat of Democrat Andrew Gillum. And we know back during that whole 2000 debacle with Bush and Gore, how Jeb Bush, as governor of Florida, was just pulling all kinds of strings, just cheating every way, left, right, up, and down, trying to get his brother into the White House. And we still don't know to this day who actually won that vote. Ultimately, the Supreme Court made that decision, which the Constitution doesn't allow them to do. But they said, we're going to give it to Bush. This is not a precedent for any future cases, and there's no other remedy. And the children are still out there doing what they're doing. Apparently, over in Winnebago County at the Republican headquarters, 42-year-old Timothy Dam was arrested for allegedly spray painting the word rape and shame dozens of times on the Winnebago County Republican headquarters Sunday morning. And apparently he just stuck around till the police showed up. He got interviewed on Eyewitness News. This is really making us look bad to the rest of the world. So again, we're getting on back to this whole thing, the Me Too movement, the Me Too movement. Oh my goodness, I was assaulted. Brett Kavanaugh ate my crayons years ago and I blocked it from my memory and I'm only just now remembering it. But there's this interesting little article. This came out of Reason.com and it's talking about this young man and young woman who apparently had a clearly consensual mutual grope. She was groping him, and she admitted she was groping him as much as he was groping her. But after it was all over, she changed her mind, and she filed a incident report against him at the college's Office of Student and Judiciary Affairs. And even though it was clearly consensual, and ultimately it was ruled that it was clearly consensual, and he hadn't done anything wrong, he still wound up spending $12,000 defending himself. And here is where it gets really ugly. Over in the Mirror in Great Britain, they have this story about a young man, 17-year-old Jay Cheshire, was falsely accused of rape. And it destroyed his life. And even though the allegation was withdrawn, the accuser said, yeah, I made it up, he still committed suicide. And his mother was so heartbroken, she committed suicide. So there's two more victims of the Me Too movement. That's the kind of damage and destruction that is being just raging across the world in the name of political correctness. Now, I understand that there is a place for politics, or should be a place for politics, but when it so dominates a society that innocent lives are just thrown into the shredder for political gain, it's gone too far. There's too much politics in this country. Do you know in other countries there's a legal limit to campaign seasons? It's only a few months before the election. Here in the United States, it seems like the politicians are always campaigning. They're already starting to make speeches about 2020. It's just too much. It is way too much. We got to take another break for commercials. We will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And do you remember Rose McGowan? She's an actress, and she was the one who first went public with the accusations about Harvey Weinstein. And that's what sparked the Me Too movement, because all of a sudden you had all these other actresses coming out and saying, me too, I was a victim, I was a victim. Everybody was trying to get on that bandwagon because it meant free publicity, which in the entertainment industry, that is manna from heaven. And now Rose McGowan is saying that it really is a lot of nonsense. It's gotten out of control. That Hollywood's approach to Me Too is all bull. And it did turn into this witch hunt environment. And I wonder how many careers of men who actually did not do anything wrong have been destroyed in the process. And again, we went through this before. We went through this before all the way back in the 1990s, and you'd think we would learn a lesson from that. You'd think we would have learned a lesson from the Salem witch trials. We would have learned a lesson from the McCarthy smears. Now, history may not repeat, but it sure does rhyme. And it is a tragedy for those that it happens to. And again, this willingness to sacrifice innocent lives for personal or political gain, that's a bad character trait. And the rest of the world is looking at Americans and saying, wow, look at these vain, self-centered people who are just utterly ruthless and willing to destroy people they don't even know to get ahead, to get their 5 minutes of fame on the corporate media. That's not a positive image. Okay, so let's talk about the war zones. There's a lot going over there, and we're getting more information about Russia's transfer of the S-300 to Syria. Syria got 24 launchers and a total of over 300 missiles. So apparently Putin picked up on the possibility that the U.S. might try an overwhelm attack to deplete Syria's missiles, and apparently sent the additional missiles free of charge. Now, on the same day, Turkish state media declared that Idlib militant groups had completed withdrawal of their heavy weapons, including their Grad rocket launchers, mortars, and medium-range missiles from the demilitarized zone. So it looks like that is settling down. Now, the issue, of course, is that demilitarized zone is a temporary stopgap measure that was put in place in response to the U.S. Threat that any attack anywhere in Syria on any of the militants would prompt a U.S. response. So now it is a waiting game. Assad has made it very clear this is not going to be a permanent situation, that at some point in the future, the legitimate government of Syria is going to reassert control over these territories. And the smart thing for these militants to do would be to accept the offer of amnesty, surrender their weapons, and just go home. Now, over in Hama, the terrorists have suffered heavy defeats in clashes with the Syrian army. And apparently there were major losses on the terrorists. The Syrian army's artillery and missile units pounded the movements of a group of al-Turkestani Islamic Party near the village of al-Mansura and Tal was set north of Al Ghab Plain in northern Hama, killing and wounding a number of terrorists and forcing their remaining pockets to retreat. Now, apparently, Tahrir al-Sham terrorists deployed in southeastern Idlib launched missile attacks on army positions in the village of Joran in the western Al Ghab Plain. The army's artillery and missile units retaliated, inflicting major losses on them. So again, this is the mop-up. This thing is all but over. And Putin has succeeded in basically forcing a stalemate onto both Israel and the United States. Now, it's not going to hold for that long. It's going to hold for at least 3 months. And that's the 3 months that the Russian crews will still be manning those S-300 weapon systems. Because for Israel or the United States to deliberately target Russian forces in Syria is a very serious matter that could lead to an out-of-control escalation. Okay, we're going to take a phone call from Steve Elkins. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I guess it's just a prediction from you, from Donald Trump, what's going to happen. He rode around with Rod Rosenstein, and I just wonder if you think he's going to just kind of ride this out to the midterms, and hopefully if the Republicans win the midterms, he'll release Rod Rosenstein and Jeff Sessions at the same time. What do you think?
I don't think he's going to need for the Republicans to win in the midterms. I think the only reason he's not letting Rod Rosenstein and Sessions go now is because the Democrats will campaign on it. Cover up. He's trying to, he's blocking the Russian collusion investigation. So I think Trump is going to wait until after the midterms, which is just 4 weeks away. And regardless of the outcome of that election, I think a lot of people inside the Department of Justice and the FBI are going to get their pink slips.
I hope so. Yeah, you make a good comment a while back saying, he should have cleaned house from the very beginning, and we wouldn't even be here right now if he'd just done the right thing and just reorganized and built his own team and not keep people over from the Obama administration to thinking that they might be loyalists. That was a pretty stupid thing to do. Like you said, you can do that in business, but you can't do that in politics.
No. It was, I think, one of his biggest single mistakes going into the White House. And he's paid for it. He has certainly paid for it.
He sure has. That's it, Mike. Hey, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and the phone lines are open again. Getting on back to Syria, apparently more Russian forces have been deployed near the U.S.-backed militia in Deir ez-Zor. And they're basically intensifying tensions between Moscow and Washington because, again, Washington wants Russia to leave. They want Iran to leave. They want to just be able to go on in there and help themselves to any country they feel like taking. And Russia and Iran have basically stepped in and said, no, you've gobbled up enough countries. You should be happy with what you've got now. But as you will probably recall from the Project for the New American Century, the ultimate U.S. goal is they want it all. Today's Syria, tomorrow's the world. Sikhail, Sikhail, Sikhail. There are also reports that a large volume of Russian army equipment has been sent to Al-Mayadin and Makan, and Russian soldiers have deployed in different positions near the Syrian Democratic Forces strongholds. So, looks like Putin is trying to keep all these forces in check that are not going along with the demilitarization plan. So, as I mentioned before, the Idlib heavy weapons withdrawal is close to being done. And so it looks like that part of Syria is finally closing down. And in an interview with Sputnik News, a Syrian army representative said that groups such as Hayati al-Sham, which is mostly al-Nusra, including 16 Syria Free Army groups controlled by Turkey, had pulled their heavy weapons out of the southern, southwestern, and eastern parts of the province. And as of right now, the militants only have medium and light weapons left. And that changes the dynamic. So Assad is out there and he's talking about the hysteria around Idlib. And basically Assad believes that the victory of the Syrian government forces in the struggle is basically going to spell the end of the West's plans for Syria. Because if Idlib is liberated, then all those other little pockets of resistance are going to collapse. And reiterated that ultimately the demilitarization zone is a temporary stopgap, and that ultimately all of these little areas of Syria will come back under Syrian control. Of course, Israel has other plans for the Golan, and that may be a bit of a problem there. Over in Turkey, there is a war of words between Turkey and Saudi Arabia. Now, the problem is that Saudi Arabia, there was this dissident journalist, Jamal Khashoggi, who went into the Saudi consulate in Istanbul and never came on out. Now, Saudi Arabia is saying that he left, but his girlfriend was apparently waiting for him outside, and she's saying, no, he never showed up. So Erdogan is now demanding the Saudis produce proof that the journalist left the consulate alive, because the consulate has a lot of security, and they've got security cameras, and the security cameras are on recording devices. There should be a video of this man walking out of the consulate under his own power. Now, the problem is Saudi Arabia has a bad reputation for disappearing people, often in very violent means. And so Erdogan is saying, we need to know what happened here. Turkey is threatening to search the Saudi consulate. Now, that would be a serious breach of international protocol, because when you have an embassy or a consulate, technically that is the sovereign soil of that nation. When you step through that gate, you're stepping literally from Turkey to Saudi Arabia. And I'm sure that Saudi Arabia would be very upset at this violation of their sovereign territory. But that's where we are right now. So things are heating up over there. Meanwhile, the exiled Saudi prince Khalid bin Faram al-Saud, who fled to Germany after the empowerment of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, is now calling on the people of Saudi Arabia to overthrow the current rulers in Riyadh, basically following the recent suspected murder of prominent journalist Jamal Khashoggi. And again, I'm sure he's motivated by the most noble of ambitions, which is he wants the throne for himself. But we have been hearing a lot from inside Saudi Arabia that a lot of the other ruling family and even King Salman are less than thrilled with what Mohammed has been up to. And so we should not be completely unprepared for a sudden change of leadership in Saudi Arabia, because Mohammed got them into this war in Yemen, which is costing them a huge amount of money. It's making them look bad on the world stage. And, you know, Saudi Arabia really doesn't like war. They like making money. And they don't like the fact that Mohammed is cozying up to Netanyahu. So it's a sticky situation over there. The world is going crazy here. Now, here's something to pay attention to. Saudi Arabia has been over in Yemen murdering civilians, women and children, starving them, and the corporate media, no big deal. But one Washington Post reporter disappears in the hands of the Saudi consulate, and the American corporate media goes nuts. Oh my goodness, this can't be allowed to stand. This is horrible what Saudi Arabia has done. See the little bit of double standard there. Every 10 minutes, a child in Yemen starves to death. And the news media, price of war, no big deal. Much of the population of Yemen has been displaced. They're no longer in their homes. They've had to basically flee to refugee camps. No big deal to the mainstream media. One reporter disappears. It's a global crisis here. A little bit of, again, hypocrisy. Okay. They're still going on and on about Ambassador Haley. She'll be missed. She was. They're going to polish up her image. Apparently, late last week, a U.S. Northrop Grumman RQ-4 Global Hawk flew around Russia's northwestern borders for 11 hours. This is the second time in 2 days. And the drone flight was spotted by plane radar, a Russian aviation resource, and it spotted the drone taking off from the U.S. airbase at Sigonella, Italy, flying over Greece, through Turkey, through Romania, and into Ukraine, making a loop in the country's east, and then heading southwest and around the western and southern coast of Crimea toward Krasnodar, southern Russia. And the Russians are a little concerned. They're being spied on. That's exactly what the drone does. But as long as it remains in international airspace, they're not going to do anything about it. Meanwhile, Ukraine has launched large-scale air drills with the United States and other NATO countries. Ukraine is emphasizing the idea of coordination with Poland and Romania, two nations that are on Ukraine's border. And Ukraine is still out there pushing the idea that Russia is an imminent military threat to them. And they're out there saying World War III is going to start over Ukrainian territory. So they're calling this Operation Clear Sky 2018. And all you need to do is just look at a map and look at who is sending their military forces where to understand who the real aggressor is in all of this. And it isn't Russia. Now, Ukraine may have to scale down their operation a little bit because apparently one of their largest ammunition depots blew up and they had to evacuate 10,000 people in the area. So this explosion occurred earlier today at a Ukrainian Defense Ministry depot near the city of Chernigov, about 180 kilometers east of the Ukrainian capital of Kiev. The area was placed on lockdown for air and land travel immediately, because I imagine there's probably a lot of stuff in there that's still cooking off. Now, no casualties have been reported, and nobody is saying whether this was an accident or sabotage. But they've cleared the airspace for a 20-kilometer radius of the site, and all road and rail transport has been suspended. So it was a bad one, no question about it. Meanwhile, over in China, relations are continuing to get a little bit frosty. And Trump may have been a little bit too quick to praise North Korea following Pompeo's visit with Kim Jong-un, because Chinese President Xi Jinping refused to meet with Pompeo during his visit to Beijing yesterday, while China's foreign minister said in no uncertain terms the U.S. should not expect China's help with the denuclearization of North Korea. Why would China help the U.S. after all the U.S. is doing to China? What a deranged foreign policy. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. So before the commercial break, we were talking about how Xi Jinping refused to meet with Mike Pompeo. And China's foreign minister is saying flat out, the U.S. should not expect China's help to denuclearize North Korea. And why would Pompeo even expect that China was going to go along with anything the United States wants right now? We're in this tariff war, which is harming both economies. The U.S. sold weapons to Taiwan, which angered China. The U.S. continues to send military assets through the South China Sea to provoke China down there. It's a very disjointed foreign policy where you go in and you anger a country and then you turn around and say, we need your help. What kind of a reaction were they expecting to get? It really makes no sense. It makes no sense at all. Our foreign policy is a joke. Other than, stomp on Palestine and do what Israel says, it's not well thought out. It really is not at all. Okay. Apparently, Israel has arrested 500 Palestinians over their Facebook posts. This includes women, children, and even some members of Parliament or the Knesset over their social media posts. And the Palestine Center for Prisoner Studies spokesman Riyad al-Ashgar said the Israeli authorities began arresting Palestinians for their social media posts since the start of the Jerusalem Intifada, claiming that such uploads incite terror against Israel. So Israel formed this cyber unit to monitor all Palestinian social media posts. And apparently any posts that support Palestine or report on Israeli war crimes is defined as incitement of terror, and you can go to prison for it. And I'm sure that Israel would love to accomplish exactly the same thing here in the United States of America, to criminalize criticism of Israel's actions here. Now, as you know, Mike Pompeo made what appear to be some progress in North Korea. Kim Jong-un and Trump are going to have another summit. And apparently North Korea has agreed to allow international inspectors visit the Pyongyang, the site of all 6 of North Korea's nuclear tests. And that was seen as a bit of a victory. But not everybody sees it that way. For one thing, the site has already been destroyed. There's not really going to be a lot for the inspectors to look at. The actual mountain itself collapsed from the last 2 tests, which were very large. The last one was 7 times stronger than the bomb America dropped on Hiroshima. And the whole mountain has collapsed. And as far as the outside facilities, satellites show they have been demolished. We're going to take a break for station identification. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And stepping on back to the resignation of Nikki Haley. Apparently, just before Trump got on board Air Force One for his latest trip to a rally, he actually floated the idea that Ivanka Trump would be a dynamite choice to replace Nikki Haley. And then he basically backed off and said he can't really do it. He'd be accused of nepotism, which, yes, that's exactly what would happen. But you have to wonder why he said it in the first place. Anyway, this is hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Okay. Apparently, Ron Paul shares my concern that Brett Kavanaugh could be assassinated. The liberals are just that scared of a conservative Supreme Court. They think that everything they've accomplished over the last several years, like men being able to use the women's room and everything, is all going to go away. Now, do you remember, I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce his name, Kanye West or Kane West? Kanye West, thank you. Kanye West, he's been demonized by all kinds of people for supporting Trump, for wearing his Make America Great hat. And he's taken a lot of heat for it. But apparently it's all going to work out in the end, because he's going to have lunch with Donald Trump and Jared Kushner at the White House on Thursday, where they'll sort of rap together, I presume, about various pressing topics. All right, so let's talk about the economic news, because, again, a lot of indicators saying something has to break real soon here. And let me whip out my iPhone here and take a quick look at just how the stock market ended up today. Oh, well, mixed. Not really good, not really bad here. Ford Motor Company is complaining that Trump's tariffs are going to cost them $1 billion, and that will result in layoffs. Now, obviously, a lot of those tariff costs are going to be passed on to the consumer. And there are already indications that new car prices may increase by as much as $7,000 to pay for the tariffs. And that is going to cause a lot of people to say, maybe we don't need a new car, maybe we'll just go with a more recent vintage pre-owned car. And so that's going to put more of a strain on the auto market, which is not doing all that well. Meanwhile, over in China, they're trying very hard to find ways to evade the U.S. tariffs. And Chinese exporters have found a way to dodge hundreds of billions of U.S. tariffs. And basically, it has to do with the identification code that's checked by U.S. Customs. The plywood would be stripped of its Chinese markings. They'll ship it under some other code indicating a different country of origin. And I'm sure the people who are buying these products, they understand it's illegal, but they've got businesses to keep in business here. And we're still hearing a lot of grief over at Verizon. And I noticed they're running a big ad campaign right now. But Verizon's 13 board members have outsourced many jobs at many other companies before launching their joint campaign to outsource another 44,000 Verizon jobs, including at least 2,500 computer jobs to low-wage Indian visa workers. They've actually, I think they also subcontracted some of their IT work to an Indian company in India. And the computer jobs are being outsourced to Infosys, which is an Indian company accused of undercutting American workers and discriminating against black and white Americans in favor of Indian nationals. Now, Verizon spokesperson Rich Young told Breitbart News that he does not know where the numbers are coming from and said the estimate of 44,000 jobs is fake news. But the Wall Street Journal is confirming it, saying that they got it from a spokesman within Verizon. So Verizon is now engaged in a public relations campaign to try and look good. But again, this is so short-sighted. All of these companies, they're cutting wages and salaries, they're letting workers go. Where do they think the people are going to come from who are going to walk into those Verizon stores and buy those new smartphones? You really do have to think about it. We're at a state right now where the consumer economy is in trouble, whether it's Retail Mageddon, all these iconic stores that have gone out of business. And apparently nobody inside the economic system has the courage to stand up and say, we're going in a bad direction. That if we need customers to come into our shopping malls and buy the products we are manufacturing, then we have got to pay our workers decent wages and salaries, because our workers, our employees, are also our customers. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network here. Up in Canada, their real estate bubble is taking a toll. Real estate is the least affordable ever. And on average, Canadian families are spending 75% of their income just to make the payments on their home. All right, we're going to take a phone call here from Kenny in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. I didn't hear the static that I used to hear. But anyway, I tuned in 10 minutes late, so I'm going to have to catch some of your comments about Nikki Haley on the replay. But I was watching CBSN this morning when it happened, and they were showing all kinds of pictures of Nikki Haley, and you could just see the anger in her face. And it's like, how in the world did she become an ambassador? Maybe they should have caught pictures of her smiling instead. I don't know, unless they want to show that she was tough when she needed to be tough. I don't know, but I'm glad she's gone.
Well, the big question is, who's she going to be replaced by? And is the new ambassador to the United Nations going to be even more aggressive at pushing for war?
Yeah, that's my concern. That's my concern as well. I mean, we might end up with someone better, or we might end up with someone worse. Let's hope.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's going to be somebody who's worse here. One of the things I didn't like about Nikki Haley is it seemed like she very often took the script into her own hands, and rather than just being the voice of the administration at the United Nations, she seemed to sort of strike out on her own. And again, there's a little bit of buzz going on that the resignation was not 100% amicable, even though that's the public face being put out by the White House.
Now, was there any reason to say why she's resigning? I mean, obviously she's making herself look good by saying, "Want to give somebody else a chance," term limits, all that, which I'm not convinced.
Well, yeah, the official story is that she wanted out after just 2 years, and that she informed Donald Trump that she was going to be resigning at the end of the year 6 months ago. But she'd come under criticism for her excessive use of private aircraft to get around. And whether that had anything to do with the resignation or whether it had to do with her not being a 100% accurate spokesperson on behalf of the administration, we're not sure. But I agree with you. Looking at the pictures of her this morning, she does seem very angry, like this may not have been entirely her decision.
And maybe maybe so many people just didn't like her so much. She was just under pressure. I bet that's the reason, but we'll see.
Okay.
All right. Thanks a lot. That's all I have.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open. We're talking about the economic news, and right now every major crypto coin is down this year with an average decline of 74%. And I think a big part of the problem are all the crypto miners. And I'm talking about the hackers, the ones who are stealing time on your computer to mine Bitcoins, because they're basically inflating the supply of cryptocurrencies. And if you inflate the supply of the currency, its value goes down. Economics 101. All right, we're going to take another phone call here from Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Hopefully next will go Bolton and maybe Pompeo. I don't think this is by accident. I think it might be known now that she's probably the one that leaked all that stuff to that. What was the New York Times there? That she was the leaker there, and Haley, the woman is a disgusting neocon. She's a warmonger. I made on different social media, on Twitter and Facebook. I said that into somebody's neocon, like what's his name? The guy, the senator from Pennsylvania, and another, and also this fat part-time. I think he is a radio host on out of Atlanta there. So like I said, I think it's a very good thing. Hopefully, not just that she felt like resigning. I don't think she felt like resigning. I think probably she's been found out, and maybe I'm crossing my fingers and praying that Donald Trump now becomes the man I voted for, not Tool of the neocon. What do you think?
Well, I understand that Nikki Haley was suspected of being one of the many leakers to the media, and that may be a factor as well. Whether Trump is going to be able to become the candidate we thought we were voting for or not is going to be determined significantly 4 weeks from today. If the GOP hangs on to the Congress, then Trump's second 2 years in office, he's going to be able to do a lot more. But again, his biggest mistake coming into the White House was being magnanimous in victory and allowing all these Obama holdovers to keep their jobs. And they all worked against him.
Yeah, that they did. But why he put this woman in there in the first place? I mean, she wasn't even one of his supporters during the election. She was one of these so-called never-Trumpers. I just don't understand it. I mean, she's getting all kinds of acolytes from the so-called conservative media and politicians and all, because she's one of them. She is establishment Republican conservative. That's why I don't call myself a conservative, because real conservatives are not warmongers. Real conservatives are people like the Rand Paul and his father, Ron Paul. They're not, warmongering thugs that don't want to send more and more Americans into harm's way and really risk blowing up the planet eventually. So that's not to me a conservative. So, like I said, I'm just very glad that she's gone. I can't see it being much worse than her. I mean, what else are you going to have? I mean, she's about as bad as it gets, I think.
I don't know. I mean, I could think of, if Bolton was named UN ambassador, I think things would get a lot worse. But right now, I think the Republican Party, if you will, or Republicans, are splitting into two camps. There are the neocons, who are the pro-war, pro-Israel, let's go on out and conquer the world. And then you have the paleocons, which is what I see myself as, along with Rand Paul and Ron Paul, who go back to the original principles of limited government, letting people live their lives, and just trying to run the country as best you can.
Pat Buchanan is like that also.
Yes.
There's quite a number. So is Reverend, I don't know if you ever heard of him, Chuck Baldwin.
Oh, yes.
Chuck Baldwin. He's he has a radio show online also, I think on Sunday. I get them sometimes on my Facebook. So people like that are real. They're true. They know that we don't need to go keep on getting into war, and that we should try to make peace with the world, and we should start minding our own business. Not that
I agree.
difficult. I just understand it. They're just trying to muddle into everybody's business, trying to, push, get in other people's faces around the world, like now we're doing in China, and they're part of the ocean there. It just doesn't make sense. Push NATO to Russia's borders, and of course what we're doing in Syria, the crimes we're committing in Syria. Basically what she is, by the way, is she's a terrorist's best friend. That's pretty much all I got to say, Mike. Like I said, hopefully this is a good sign.
Well, I'm certainly not sad to see her go, but again, the open question is who's going to replace her? And say again?
I'm just saying, I'd rather see Bolton back in the UN position than where he's now, the National Security Advisor. I don't want to see him anywhere over there, but I think he could do less damage being at the UN, because let's face it, they can't start. There's only so much a UN ambassador can do anyway. But to see him right there at the right hand of Trump now, advising him on national security matters, to me that's about as dangerous as it gets. This guy is bad news. This guy is evil.
Yes.
And there he is, right there at the right hand of Trump. Even Bush didn't have a guy like that in his as far as he had him as a UN ambassador, but he didn't have him right there at the White House advising him. I mean, it's really bad news. And, that's pretty much all I got to say, Mike. Like I said, let's pray for the best.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch over to Rick in Arizona. Aloha, Rick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Nikki Haley's on my mind. I think people that think Nikki Haley is quitting is a good deal. I think you kind of alluded to the fact that, be careful what you wish for. I think the next person that goes in there is going to be a lot tougher. It's going to be, when you have Jared Kushner looking over Donald Trump's shoulder, that's the mafia, people. And the mafia don't like women in their business. I'll be surprised if another woman is appointed. I'll predict that there will be a man. And if you take a look at Trump's administration, you don't see a lot of women. And Kellyanne Conway, she ain't no Gentile. And as far as you're talking about those tariffs, it's amazing that the American people really have been, defanged, disarmed from understanding things through the educational system. This is a sales tax, people. All this stuff is being passed on to the consumer. The money's going into the Treasury. It's a huge windfall for the Treasury. But we're paying for it.
Yes. You're exactly right. It's just another hidden tax.
Yep. Thanks for the call. Thanks for taking my call.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open here. And over at Wells Fargo, it's time for the sequel. Apparently, Wells Fargo wants to bring back the mortgage-backed security, despite the disaster they were back in 2007, 2008. And this post-crisis mortgage bond tied to U.S. home loans without government backing. And this is all going to be finalized within a week. So here we go again. We're seeing massive housing bubbles throughout the United States. We're seeing the return of the very derivatives that led up to the 2008 crisis. Mortgage-backed securities, credit default swaps, collateralized debt obligations, subprime lending, all the usual suspects. And then when you look at all the scandals Wells Fargo's been caught up in the last 2 years, it speaks to the desperation and volatility they face. And so this is an act of desperation to go on back and try and revive the mortgage-backed securities and hope that the American people don't remember what an absolute disaster they were. And don't forget, it was those mortgage-backed securities that resulted in the defunding of a lot of pension funds across this country. This is a mistake we should not repeat. Anyway, we're coming up on another commercial break, and join us on the air, 800-313-9443. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And for those of you living in Florida and Georgia, Hurricane Michael has now strengthened to a Category 3 storm. If you are in the path of the storm, please take it seriously. This is going to be a bad one. All right, let's take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, with Nikki Haley, yeah, be careful. It is be careful what we wish for. I mean, maybe Satan's going to be the next U.S. ambassador to the UN. I mean,
I think he already has been several times.
I mean, she was a wretched woman. You know, she wasn't good, but I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he's going to be shuffling around people, or maybe he's not even shuffling anybody around. Maybe somebody else is doing the shuffling. You know, I mean, I don't know. I thought it was a weird move at this particular time. No, you know, like with everything that's going on. Why would wouldn't she wait till after his term is over? You know.
Well, I mean, that's another 2 years. Okay, and I'm also wondering why it was announced now, given that she wants to leave at the end of the year. They could have postponed the announcement until after the midterms, because I'm pretty sure the Democrats are going to try and find some way to spin this as a negative for the Trump administration. That he's anti-woman or some such nonsense.
Hey, Mike, I wanted to talk about the economy. Like, what do they say the unemployment rate is at? 3%?
Something
like that. Anybody actually believe that? You had a caller from, I think, yesterday, Minnesota, if I remember. He said, like, there's homeless camps all over the place, and there's homeless camps all over the country.
Yes.
And there's no way the economy is doing well. Maybe for a certain group, but as for a whole, you know, you can't. There's no way all these homeless camps are popping up, and you have like a 3% unemployment rate. People need, realize by now it's all rigged numbers, just like everything else is rigged.
That's true.
You know, there's never going to be a recovery. I don't think, because it's just too much debt. There's not enough going into revitalizing.
There's nothing to recover with. You know, we have very few factories. The farms are all being automated. There's nowhere to put people to work. And you can't recover an economy unless people have jobs and are able to earn money with which you start rebuilding their lives.
Don't you find it amazing how all those abandoned factories, they're all still abandoned. Nothing's been done with all those buildings, all the Rust Belt area. Nothing's been changed. Nothing's been fixed, improved, nothing. You know, it's just sad.
A lot of those buildings are too badly corroded to be renovated. They're going to have to be torn down and completely replaced. But we're not seeing that either. Every once in a while there's an announcement that thus and such a company is starting up business or restarting their business. I think there was a steel mill, and they'll celebrate the creation of 130,000 jobs last month, while hiding the fact that 200,000 jobs were lost. But if you look at the total number of people without work in this country, which is close to 100 million. Adding 100,000 jobs, it's a drop in the bucket.
That's like about almost a third of your population.
Yes.
Because I think it's 320 million. I mean, that's insane. But yeah, I mean, there's just no money. There's no investment. All these, the people realize, the stock market's up. That's because all the companies are buying back their stock. That's it. Most people don't own stocks. Small group percentage do, but majority don't. And Mike, I wanted to switch gears on this. You talked about with the biomedical lab in Georgia.
Yes.
Biomedical was the front for it, but I know 2 of the floors were controlled by the U.S. military.
Yes.
So, that was a bioweapons research lab, and they're all over Europe. I mean, if it's a biomedical, why does it have to be? Why is it in our state of Georgia here?
Well, for the same reason that the CIA puts its torture centers in other countries, it's deniability. The United States, based on treaties, is not supposed to be working on chemical and biological weapons, but yet they are. But if they can do it in other countries where it's out of sight, out of mind, and deniable. But Russia's coming on in, at least in this one lab in Georgia, and saying, we know what's going on there, we demand an explanation.
Yeah, did you hear where they're supposed to be working on hepatitis? But they're actually working on, there's some weird stuff going on. I know almost 80 people have died from, I don't know if they're part of the trials or there's weird dirt stuff coming out of the smokestacks and it smells around there. So but I bet you they probably closing up shop now. They're going to close that shop up and move.
Yeah, they're going to go someplace else and set up shop again. And we ran that story the other day where these scientists have come forward with their suspicion that Ebola was created in a laboratory as a biological weapon. Anyway, we got to take another break for commercials. Dustin, do you have any more?
Oh, that's it, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. We're going to go back to the phones here. Welcome back to the show, and we're talking with Nathan in Northern California. Aloha, Nathan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. Just a real quick call. Do you really believe that the economy is that bad? Dustin calls in and says everything is rotten, everything is rotten, everything is rotten. And personally, I'm sick of Dustin calling in and saying everything is rotten. What do you really, really, really believe that this economy is that bad?
Yes, I do. It's completely out
really
of balance.
Believe that?
We've never seen wealth inequality at such a high level, where all the wealth is concentrated at the top. We're in a wartime economy. Our infrastructure is being neglected to pay for all of these wars of conquest around the globe. And we are having some of the top economic experts saying there has to be a major stock market correction because it's all been run up through market manipulation, and there's no value underneath those stock prices to prop them up any longer.
Okay, Mike. Well, I just can't stand Dustin's negativity, and all of the negativity is just too much for me. I'll check in with you in 6 months and see how you're doing, but thank you so much for taking my call.
All right, you're welcome. And I know it's a dire situation, but hiding from it isn't going to make it go away. In fact, if anything, you should be looking at your own personal finances and saying, what can I do to reduce the impact on me when the bad things start to happen? Obviously, getting out of debt as much as possible, not being in the stock market, having as much precious metals as you can. It's all common sense stuff. But running away and hiding for 6 months, you're going to get caught by surprise. All right, now over in Pakistan, they're getting ready to request another bailout from the IMF. This is following on Argentina's footsteps. And basically, the U.S. is opposed. The U.S. does not want the IMF to bail out Pakistan. And Pompeo was out there saying that We look forward to engagement with the government of Pakistan's expected new Prime Minister, Imran Khan. But he says there's no rationale for a bailout that pays off Chinese loans to Pakistan. That's really the issue. Let's find another way to zing China. Now, as was reported earlier, Pakistan's urgent need for the emergency cash came as a result of a currency crisis that saw a serious devaluation of the Pakistan rupee, as Pakistan burned through a third of its reserves in the past year. But the reason for the U.S. opposition to an IMF bailout is Pakistan won't be able to repay its loans to China. It's just another way of digging at China. That's what's going on here. And once again, we're seeing sanctions here, sanctions there. You get a sanction, you get a sanction, you get a sanction. U.S. officials have frozen the U.S. assets of the Russian oligarch Oleg Deripaska. This is from the New York Post, including his sprawling mansion on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Now, Deripaska bought the property for $42.5 million in 2008, according to property records. FBI agents tried unsuccessfully to flip Deripaska in exchange for information on Russian organized crime and Russia's aid to Donald Trump's 2016 campaign. So there it is again. There was no evidence of Russia-Trump collusion. The FBI is trying to manufacture it by putting pressure on this guy. All right, we're going to take another phone call from Dan in Washington State. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Thanks for taking the call. I just want to respond to that last caller about tariffs. It's the people, it's a tax, but it's a tax that creates jobs. And it's guys like that called in that don't have the history knowledge of the economy in this country, that we always had tariffs, and that's what built up our economy to begin with. And once they got rid of the tariffs, there goes your jobs. So it's very simple, and I just don't understand. It's like a never-ending argument, you know, but
no, it's a never-ending argument. The problem is we're not seeing a surge of jobs. I mean, they're coming up with numbers that, as I said before, it's a drop in the bucket compared to the number of Americans without work. So as far as job creation goes, the tariffs are proving to be tremendously ineffective.
Well, they're just started. He hasn't even hardly gotten tariffs yet. They're just barely talking about it. But if you go back to, you know, before World War II, we had a 25% tariff all throughout from the Civil War, all through. That's what, you're not going to have free trade with China, you know, and without tariffs and not lose all your jobs. It's just very common sense. So, you know, I think it's going to be painful for a few years because it will raise prices. But eventually you'll get the jobs back.
I don't know how many jobs we're going to get here. I mean, you have all the fast food restaurants are now automating, you know, self-service kiosks. There's a story we're hitting a little later in the show today about somebody has now set up the world's first totally automated farm. The only people working on this farm are the ones who are there to repair the various pieces of machinery. And we're seeing this all over the place. You know, robots to assemble cars, robots to... Hang on a minute, okay? If American corporations are going fully into automation, then no amount of tariffs are going to bring those jobs back.
Well, that's true, but when you go to Walmart and see everything made in China, it's not because China has better robots. So you're still going to bring jobs back with tariffs. And all this stuff isn't made in China because of better robots. So, yeah, there's automation, but that's just the talking point that the globalists use to keep free trade going and globalism going and keep the jobs away from coming back. So, yeah, I mean, that's all I got to say.
All right, well, thank you very much, Dan. You know, and I keep hearing this other side of the argument that the tariffs are going to bring back the jobs. No, not really. Because we're currently in an economy where corporations want to automate everything. And again, it's a very short-sighted policy. And as robots get more and more sophisticated, there's not going to be very many jobs that the robots can't do. Now, not everybody is a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. Actually, it's a very small segment of the population. But, you know, your ordinary middle-class jobs, I mean, construction, they now have robots that build entire houses. The trend is very, very obvious. And as I said before, it's also very short-sighted. All right, down in Venezuela, after decades of economic warfare, their annual inflation rate hit 488,865% in September. They're heading into Zimbabwe territory. Over in New York City, City Council member Jimmy Van Bramer basically went on to Twitter to brag about ripping up a public sign that basically reminded New Yorkers that illegal immigrants need to be reported to the police. And so Van Bramer ripped the sign down. He videoed himself doing it. And he tweeted, "Saw this trash on Skillman Avenue during my AM run, tore them up. We are a sanctuary city. We need to be a sanctuary neighborhood. All immigrants are welcome here. If you see these, feel free to take them down. Be a sanctuary neighbor. Must trump values." Now, in point of fact, illegal immigrants are illegal immigrants. And they should not be here without going through the proper immigration process. But the Democrats are desperate to just open those borders and flood people in. Meanwhile, up in Portland, Oregon, in fact, this was just on Fox News a little while ago, there was a big protest / riot that took over a busy intersection in this protest over the shooting of a black suspect. And it got so out of control, the police basically backed off, and it wound up Antifa was directing traffic to get people through there. They're not interested in guilt or innocence or who's to blame. It's just protest, protest, protest. Down in California, the Department of Motor Vehicles has now admitted that non-citizens have been added to the voter rolls because of California's motor voter law. Nobody at the DMV is asking for verification of citizenship before registering them to vote. And apparently the problem came out in September, where the DMV said it discovered it sent the Secretary of State's office 23,000 erroneous voter registrations. So it's out of control. It's just out of control. Tucker Carlson gets it. Tucker Carlson gets it. On his show, he had a debate with a former illegal immigrant, Cesar Vargas, about the state of immigration policy and what should happen. And, of course, Cesar Vargas wants open borders, and he says illegal immigrants in the United States should get voting rights. And Tucker Carlson came on out and said, here's the bottom line. I just want our viewers to understand the agenda of lunatics like you, and I mean that with all respect. I like you personally, but you are saying 22 million brand new voters in our electorate, okay, out of nowhere, here illegally, and now they vote. 90% of them will vote for the Democrats. What you're saying is that one political party will have a hammerlock on national elections forever. What do you think the rest of us think about that? And Vargas came on back and said, I simply say, why don't the Republicans and the Democrats compete for the vote and let people have their say? If Democrats want to pass immigration or Republicans want immigration reform, give them the power to vote and let's compete. That's what democracy is all about. And Carlson came on back and said, yeah, letting foreigners invade your country and take over your government, that definitely sounds like democracy to me. And that's exactly what's going on. Tucker Carlson has it right. The nation is being flooded with these illegal immigrants, and by voting, they're literally going to vote our country into their pocket. And it's ridiculous to say the Republicans and the Democrats can compete for the illegal immigrant vote because the Democrats opened up the doors and give them all kinds of free stuff. And the Republicans don't want to do that. And the illegal immigrants are always going to vote for the party that's going to take stuff away from you and give it to them. 22 million illegal immigrants in this country. That's enough to completely change the outcome of an election. And we know that millions of illegal immigrants voted in 2016 for Hillary Clinton. That should not be allowed to happen. And one of the other areas where Donald Trump really dropped the ball coming into office, he was talking about election integrity, of cleaning up our election system. And yes, his commission ran into all kinds of opposition from the state election boards, proving that they've got something to hide. And then Trump gave up. He surrendered. He waved the white flag. He shut the commission down and said, we'll let the Department of Homeland Security make sure that the electronic voting machines can't be tampered with. And that was the end of it. Trump just threw away his chances for a second term in office because the people who were rigging the 2016 election, they're going to be back in 2020 trying twice as hard. And Trump has so alienated his support base, especially those of us here in the independent media. We're not going to work as hard as we did the last time. We're just going to say, okay, he did it to himself. Judicial Watch has come on out with new documents obtained from the U.S. Department of State about U.S. aid funding for George Soros' left-wing nonprofit organization in Albania. I'll bet you think George Soros was spending his own money. And the documents deal primarily with the activities of Soros' top operative in Albania, Andrei Dobrushi, the director of Open Society Foundation Albania, who's actively engaged in channeling funding to what Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban called Soros' mercenary army. And the documents show this U.S. grant money flowing through non-governmental organizations that profess to promote civil society. Excuse me, I got the hiccups. While in fact attacking traditional pro-American groups, governments, and policies. Over in Parliament, in screaming back and forth about Brexit and anti-Semitism and Jeremy Corbyn and everything, apparently the staffers at Parliament have gone public at just what a condition members of Parliament leave in their offices and meeting rooms. And they're talking about things like vomit, piles of vomit, and used condoms. And this is not what these cleaners signed up to have to deal with. They thought they were going to, run the vacuum cleaner and a dusting rag, and that was going to be that. So members of Parliament, who have now been publicly shamed, are going to enact strict new rules about their behavior. I guess clean up after yourself, pick up your own condoms or something. And Commons authorities are considering the introduction of a service agreement that would cover the appropriate use of workspaces in the Houses of Parliaments, which I don't think is going to stop anything, but at least it looks good to the masses. Okay, over in Sweden, let's talk political correctness, because there's a lot of, it's just getting sillier and sillier. Over in Sweden, the Church of Sweden is now pushing for a gender-neutral reference to Jesus. And they've chosen the general neutral pronoun hen in reference to Jesus. What, he's a chicken? But they're saying they want to avoid terms like Lord and he in worship services in order to not highlight the fact that God is male, in order to not offend women and the transgendered. Now, the move has triggered a backlash. And traditional Christians are saying this really is a very ridiculous thing to be doing. And I agree, this is so over the top. This is the shark. And right now, I think the Catholics have got bigger problems to deal with than making Jesus gender neutral. We got to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're talking about political correctness here. And again, in Sweden, a Swedish university is investigating a professor for anti-feminism and transphobia. Ooh, what did he do? He said, there are biological differences between men and women. And he's being told, you got to retract your comment. There are no biological differences between men and women. That's just not the way it works anymore. Now, the professor, Gurmund Haslau, he works in neurophysiology at Lund University, and the accusation against him was brought by a student, and he's refusing to back down. He's saying, of course there are biological differences between men and women. He was teaching a course on heritage and environment, and he cited empirical research, which supports the idea that there are differences between men and women which are biologically founded, and therefore genders cannot be regarded as social constructs alone. And the PC people and the liberals just go absolutely wild. Now, here is where things are getting a little bit out of control. Okay, over in Iceland, there's a school that is trying this new, I guess they could say it's experiment. And they have a network of 20 nursery and elementary schools. It's known as the Shali teaching model. And what it is for a certain set period of time during the school day, okay, the boys are made to paint their nails and play with makeup, and the girls are sent outside to climb the trees. Now, everybody wears the same uniform, and they have gender-neutral toys. But once a day, they are basically forced to assume the opposite gender's behaviors, if you will. It's not going to work out. And not just because that professor in Sweden says that there are biological differences between men and women. This was actually tried back in, I think, the 1980s, where there was this experiment where they took a bunch of children, put them in exact matching little jumpsuits, no visual cues about gender whatsoever other than their faces. And there was a whole bunch of gender-neutral toys, and they said, we're going to raise these kids this way, and they'll be free of the traditional gender models. And much to the researchers' disappointment, the girls went on acting like girls, and the boys went on acting like boys. Liberalism is founded on the prime assumption that everything that we think comes in from outside, that we are born with totally blank minds, tabula rasa. And it all goes back to Margaret Mead's coming of age in Samoa, which turned out to be an intellectual hoax. You can't change human nature. Liberalism's failure is they think they can. We're going to take a break for station identification. Back with hour number 3 after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And I want to read you a couple of emails that came in during the commercial break. According to an article on Yahoo Finance, Dina Powell from Goldman Sachs is under consideration to replace Nikki Haley. And then I have this other email, the caller questioning the state of the economy. Has he been to the grocery store lately? I'm on Social Security and can barely make ends meet. The economy is on a downward spiral. You and Dustin are right. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about technology. And apparently tech workers in Silicon Valley are starting to realize they have a voice. Now, we know that management of these Silicon Valley companies are feeling their oaths. They're multimillionaires, if not billionaires, and they feel the control they have over the information flow among people. But some of their workers aren't all that happy. And right now, tech workers are in demand. These Silicon Valley companies, it's easier for them to raise cash than to find good engineers, even with the H-1B. And so workers have bargaining power, and they're using it. You had the uprising over at Google over that Pentagon what they called the Baby Killer Project, and a Chinese surveillance project, to Microsoft's uprising over contracts with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Tech workers are emerging as part of the solution. Now, it's part of a wider movement to formulate an ethical basis for technical work, and a sense among established and new engineers that their work has an all-important ethical dimension, and it certainly does. You know, we're seeing with all this surveillance and all this manipulation and all this filtering, and a good example here, a story that just came on in. Apparently, a British regulator says that criticizing speed cameras on the radio violates the broadcast rules. Can't get much more Orwellian than that. You know, tell them happy news. Don't tell them, you know, about the war and surveillance and corruption. You know, tell them about kittens and butterflies and flowers and fun stuff like that. Okay, Apple iPhone users, iPhone XS users, are going to be delighted to learn that Apple has issued an update to iOS that fixed the bug that left some users unable to charge their phones if the screen was off. Apparently it was a fast fix, and they got it on out there. It's iOS version 12.01 to address the issue. So they finally got that one done. Again, showing the double standard that we have for corporate social media. Alex Jones is now on a lifetime ban from Twitter for telling off a CNN reporter at a public event. Okay? Meanwhile, there's another Twitter user, Annie Shields, who is out there on Twitter setting up a group to follow Jeff Flake around to every restaurant, cafe, store he goes to for the rest of his life and yell at him. And Twitter is apparently fine with that. They're perfectly okay with that. It's amazing. Now, a few days ago, there was this big story about how there were these 4 Russian spies that were arrested for cyber attacks and so forth. And Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs is dismissing the accusations and said the Dutch authorities had overreacted in detaining these 4 Russian officers. And apparently, these 4 GRU officers' visits to Holland had been customary. There was nothing clandestine in it. They arrived in full view, and their job was to secure the computer servers used at the Russian embassy. And they weren't trying to hide anything from anyone. They were checked into a hotel. They paid a visit to the embassy. If they'd actually been engaged in espionage, there would have been more precautions. And they were basically detained by Dutch police without any reason or explanations, and were not allowed to contact the embassy. This is just more Russia bashing, getting out of control. Now, if you are using the Safari browser, and if you're on an Apple device, it's almost certain that you are, you've probably noticed that Google is your default search engine. Apparently, Google pays Apple a lot of money to be the default search engine on Safari. Apparently, $9 billion with a B. And over the next year, it could grow up to $12 billion. Now, of course, the reason for that is that the search engines are tracking you. They're gathering marketing data, which in turn is sold to marketing companies for a profit. And right now, Google commands the lion's share of browser traffic. So that's where that is. I noticed the last time I fired up Internet Explorer on this machine, it got a pop-up ad. Wouldn't you really rather be using Google? Well, I don't know. There's been a lot of talk lately about China's violation of intellectual property rights and theft of U.S. technology. And that is a problem. But they are not the only ones. A lot of other countries are trying to acquire our technology to just, to plunder our innovation. And it turns out it's not just other countries, because there's a new documentary out called Bunch of Balloons. I'm sorry, the documentary, that was the invention. But the documentary is about the U.S. patent system. And it basically tells the story of this family man, Josh Malone, and he came up with an invention that fills 100 water balloons in under a minute. And it was called Bunch of Balloons, and he started a Kickstarter page that raised close to $1 million to get the product perfected and rolling off the assembly lines. Now, he applied for a patent, and then all of a sudden a large corporation had swooped in and stolen his idea before he could get it going. And the subsequent investigation showed how the patent system has become rigged against the solitary inventor and favors those who have money and power. And the patent system has had all these loopholes in it where the patent office can simply say, we have decided to withdraw your patent. And of course, once a patent is invalidated, somebody else comes on in, files a patent on the same thing, and they get it. Usually a very large corporation. And this documentary has interviews with people like former Attorney General Ed Meese, Thomas Massey, who's a congressional representative and is an inventor himself, Antonin Scalia, obviously from before he died, law professor and IP expert Adam Mossoff. And they're basically saying how the system has just been completely corrupted against individual inventors. Individual inventors is what made this country great. People like Edison. I mean, yes, Edison came up with the idea of turning inventing into a business, but he started out as just one guy working on a bench, making little devices that made his job as a telegrapher easier, and then working up eventually to things like the light bulb. Now, do you think he would have kept on doing that if the first invention he came up with, the patent office had said, we've decided to revoke your patent and give it to this very rich person over here? Edison would have probably said, well, I'm going to go do something else with my life here. All right, let's take a phone call from Don in Iowa. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Mike. I just can't believe this deal with the Clintons. They're charging people money to go and listen to their wonderful conversations. I mean, she could not even, when she was running for president, she couldn't hardly draw flies. I mean, nobody would come to see her.
I think this is going to be an epic fail.
Charging up to $750 a ticket.
Yeah, for
these events. I just can't believe what kind of person would pay any money to go listen to them. I mean, it makes no sense. I mean, it just does not compute. I can't believe they're going to actually sell
it reveals the amazing ego these two people have, where they're sitting there thinking, all of America wants to come hear us. They all want to come see us. Let's charge them for it. I'm sure they'll get a few people who will show up, just to be able to say, I actually met a former president once in my life. But I don't think it's going to be a huge success.
They're running into, the Democrats are running into a lot of disappointments when Obama went out to California and he couldn't draw very many people. He's supposed to be like a big rock star supposedly, but nobody wants to listen to them anymore. Everybody knows they're just full of bull.
Yep.
Okay, I'll let you go, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Yeah, I think this is their ego. It's not like they need the money. They're very, very wealthy. They don't need the money. This is just, they want to stay in the public eye. This is all about ego. I think the price of the tickets are excessive, and by the second one of these, I'm sure the price of the tickets will have fallen down to, maybe $5. I have a story here, and it's a little weird, And it begs the question, exactly who are they recruiting for the police departments? Because over in Level Plains, Alabama, not an ordinary police officer, but the chief of police was arrested last week for jerking off in public in an elevator where young children were coming and going. And apparently he was also seen jerking off while walking down the beach behind various teen girls and then filming them shower. This is the chief of police, 44-year-old man. Billy Maurice Driggers was arrested at the police station and charged with 4 counts of disorderly conduct. Who vetted this guy? Who went on out and said, this is somebody we should have as our chief of police? Now, the other day we were talking about the vaccine debate that's raging on and how a lot of vaccines are not safe. So basically, I did a flashback story. And this literally came out from the World Health Organization and the United Nations admitting that an outbreak of polio in Syria was caused by the polio vaccine. This happened back in 2017. And again, the issue is with the attenuated pathogen vaccines, where the theory is they take the polio virus, they slap the heck out of it, they knock it silly, then they put it in the syringe with a bunch of things to annoy your body to produce the immune response. But there have been previous cases where attenuated pathogens, once they're in the body, revert to full potency. And here we have the United Nations, the World Health Organization saying, yeah, it does happen. The polio vaccination campaign caused an outbreak of polio. Not getting near me with that needle here. Now, apparently, the United States Supreme Court has rejected appeals of this opinion striking down an Obama-era global warming rule. And the ruling had to do with hydrofluorocarbons, which is a greenhouse gas, and the ruling they struck down was actually written by Brett Kavanaugh. And apparently the Supreme Court has made the decision to not rehear the case before Kavanaugh joins the court. Well, apparently he showed up today, and he's getting ready to hear some high-profile cases. Now, I mentioned this story a little bit earlier in the program. Out in California, there is a company called Iron Ox, and it's going to be America's first all-robot farm. And it replaces all the human workers with intelligent machines. And the stated goal is to improve labor shortages and pressure to produce crops by using artificial intelligence and heavy machinery. And they launched it last week, and they're hoping it's going to remake the industry. Apparently, there's actually a labor shortage on these farms, which is funny because all the open borders people were assuring us the illegal immigrants would be just happy to pick those crops. I guess not. Easier to sit home, collect welfare. So they're claiming this robot farm will grow 30 times more produce than traditional farms, which sounds really good if they can make it work. But the downside is they'll exhaust the soil that much sooner. And of course, the question for me is going to be, is this farm producing regular organic natural crops or GMO? It's probably going to be GMO. There is now a new space race, and this space race is not to put the first man into space or the first woman into space, but the first paying passenger. And Richard Branson has announced that Virgin Galactic will be in space within weeks. Apparently, they've been keeping their progress very close to their chest, but they're saying that the first trip into space itself is tantalizingly close. And then he himself is planning to take the ride into space sometime in the coming months. And there is basically a race between Branson's Virgin Galactic and Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin to get those first fare-paying passengers into space. Now, Branson has been investing in space travel since 2004 and was initially expected to go to space himself before April of this year, but I guess they held off on that one. But I'll tell you, Rutan has designed some absolutely beautiful aircraft and spacecraft. They're aesthetically very pleasing here. So let's talk a little bit about human-caused global warming. The United Nations and the IPCC came out with the usual scary report saying that if we don't turn the climate around in 12 years, we're doomed, 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 doomed. And as I pointed out yesterday, we get these doomsayers every once in a while. Remember back in 2000, snowfalls are a thing of the past. Well, tell that to the people in the Upper Peninsula right now. So Jerry Brown is out there saying the world must radically change to totally renewable energy, which I think is not a bad idea. But the fear-mongering is not the best way to go about it. And there's also the other embarrassing fact that all of these liberals out there saying we've got to end petroleum, we've got to do this, they haven't come up with a working substitute. Solar cells are still very inefficient, although I'm glad to see people are using those. The windmills have turned out to be a repeat disaster. They're not holding up to the wear and tear. But just coming on out and fear-mongering isn't going to solve the problem. And I'll tell you how weird it gets. According to this story out of Investment Watch blog, the United Nations report on global warming is calling for a $240 per gallon tax on gas to discourage us all from driving around. Actually, it's going to keep us from getting to work or getting to school. We're going to become prisoners in our own house. Now, of course, Agenda 30 is all about getting us out of privately owned cars and onto public transportation. But so far, the push to have workable public transportation isn't doing very well. And we have a good example of that right here on the island of Oahu, where in this coming election, we actually have local candidates who are running on the issue of halting that train program after all of its cost here, which means we'll all get to sit and look at those concrete tracks here for the rest of our lives. We're going to take a break for commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America, welcome back to the show. So we're looking at this latest IPCC report coming out of the United Nations, and it's basically a document that is written to scare and shock. It's life or death. We're down to the last 12 years. We've got to do it now. And I think the desperation is obvious. We're going into a very early and what looks to be a very hard winter. And people have been hearing all of this stuff from the human-caused global warming people about snowfalls are a thing of the past and the world is warming. And they see winter after winter after winter, it's getting colder. And now even NASA has acknowledged that, yeah, their sensors are saying the Earth actually has cooled slightly. Now we know that the sun is going into a period of reduced activity. The sun is not a constant. It operates in cycles. When you were in science class, you probably learned about the 11-year sunspot cycle and the 22-year magnetic cycle, and now scientists are starting to see indications of much longer cycles, 3 of which are going to overlap on the low end of the cycle in the coming decade. And this could lead to a new Maunder minimum. But the United Nations has basically bet their future global government on scaring you with global warming so that you will say, oh, yes, Mr. UN, we'll stop using fossil fuel. We'll use ethanol in our car, even though it's wrecking the car. Just save us, save us, save us. I don't know that they're getting a lot of traction from this. And there's a lot of propaganda just coming right on out now. They're really cranking it up, and I think they're trying to beat the winter. over at the Daily Mail, they had a headline story: for every degree the globe warms, 2% more people will have mental health issues, according to new research. Over at my ClimateGate section, I actually have a page, a list of everything that's been blamed on global warming. You know, more prostitution, less prostitution. And this one, again, jumps the shark. This was over at the Huffington Post on how ISIS is being helped by climate change. If you don't work to fight climate change, then you're obviously with ISIS. And, global warming really stimulated the rise of the Islamic State. No, it didn't. It was U.S. money. It's amazing. Now, the other day we were talking about how this database, which is the go-to database for global temperatures, had never, ever been audited. And when it was finally audited, and this was done as part of a PhD thesis, it was found to be just riddled with errors and outlandish data to the point where it was declared it's really useless for anything. It looks good, but it's just not there. It's not accurate. And it turns out that this data set, the HAD-CRUT, is a collaboration of the Met Office's Hadley Center and the Climatic Research Unit at the University of East Anglia. And if you will remember, that Climate Research Unit at the University of East Anglia was where we had the ClimateGate leak, where somebody leaked out internal emails and computer code, source code, that showed when temperatures stopped rising in the late 1990s, they made the decision to fudge the data to keep the temperatures looking like they were going up, to keep pushing that agenda. And that's where the phrase "hide the decline" came from. And people just all over the world were looking at all of this stuff about the global warming movement and realizing the data wasn't there. It was all just propaganda and fear-mongering. So, and they were doing ridiculous correlations, things that really didn't correlate with each other were being used to sell the idea of global warming. It was a story that came out here from the Pastafarians.org. That's the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, basically saying that as the number of pirates in the world have decreased, global temperatures have gone up. And therefore, if we want to fight global warming and climate change, we need to bring back the pirates. Our matey, we need to have the pirates come on back. And this is kind of the style of the Pastafarians, because the whole idea of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, it was really a form of protest over some quasi-religious indoctrination that this man's daughter was going through at school. Apparently, they lived in a part of the country where the schools were allowed to basically enforce religious ideas. And this guy came on in and said, well, if you're going to say we have a place for Jesus here, well, then you have to have the Flying Spaghetti Monster. Anyway, we're going to take a break for commercials. We've got one caller waiting on the line. I could use a few more callers to get out of the show today, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're going to go ahead with a phone call from Mark in Montana. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy, Michael. I actually work in the oil and gas industry. I'm a health, safety, environmental specialist in West Texas. I live in Montana. I fly down, do my time. I go home, every couple of weeks. And I kind of wanted to address some of these crazy alternative energy guys. I got a friend of mine that does the same position that I do in the wind industry. He tells me it takes almost 45 years to recoup the amount of energy that it takes to build one windmill, because the amount of energy that to build the carbon fiber blades, to transport them, they drive these things a couple hundred miles, the cement and all the aluminum and the carbon fibers, and it's not something that right now is viable. And the only reason that that industry has survived is the Obama administration and the Bush administrations dumped a lot of money for subsidies to these guys. Yeah, there were subsidies. And when the subsidies ran out, and there are places here in West Texas where they put these windmills up, when the subsidies ran out, they just quit building them. I mean, there's half-finished windmills sitting in a lot of places. And we similarly with the solar, and I do believe that there's a good use for solar on an individual basis, but not on a mass basis. If you put it on your home, I think you can get by really good with it. The problem with it on a mass basis is, again, the minerals and stuff that are used in it, you know, comes from these places where people kill each other over diamonds. You know, I mean, it's almost like, you know, a bloody industry. And the amount of energy that it takes to mine some of that stuff is just, they'll never recoup it out of the solar cells. And right now it's not viable. I, for one, would love to see the day that I can go to work and work on a windmill somewhere and not have to deal with the oil and gas industry. But it's right now in my lifetime, it's not going to happen. And on another note, I want to talk about ethanol, because I see that our president, and I like Trump, but he's pushing some ethanol subsidies again. Ethanol is one of those things that it's a zero energy loss. It takes 10 units of energy to produce 9 units of ethanol.
Yes.
So we're losing energy on it, and we're taking land that we could be making food on and using it to convert to energy when the energy is right below the ground. And I will tell you a story. I had a friend that worked in North Africa, and he, in Chad specifically, and he specifically blames the ethanol boom for the Arab Spring in Chad, not all over, but in Chad, because the cost of food we had a drastic increase in the cost of food right around the time that the ethanol really started being mandated into the gasoline. And the food prices went so high that a lot of these third world countries that were spending half of their daily earnings on food could no longer, it was now 110% on food, and they could no longer afford it. And he specifically blames that on the ethanol industry and some of the crap that Bob Dole from Kansas pushed back in the day. So I just wanted to toss my 2 cents in on it. I'm not an expert. I just see the industry from the inside, and I really like to look at things objectively. And for now, we're stuck with it, guys. We're just going to have to embrace the oil and gas industry. I realize that my bosses are not exactly the nicest people on the face of the earth, but right now, American society could not exist without it, or Western civilization couldn't exist without it.
Well, you're absolutely right about that, and there's also another factor in that, especially as we head into World War III, you can't run a warplane or a tank on solar cells. Oil really is the lifeblood of conventional warfare, which maybe it would be a blessing if it did run out. There are, of course, 2 competing theories about that, and one is that oil is being renewed by microbial activity deep in the crust. The issue is that we humans are burning it faster than those little microbes can generate it. As far as the windmills, when you start subsidizing something rather than insisting it stand on its own, you're going to be headed for disaster. I remember the crash of Solyndra, who were going to make these solar cells, and that never worked out. These giant windmills, which, by the way, chop up birds. And because where do they put up the windmills? Where the wind is. Where are the birds? Riding the wind to save energy. And so there's been a big problem with bird strike on these units. But these windmills and turbines were supposed to last for 25 years, and they started failing after only 5. And in the case of one of the most popular turbines that were out there, the company producing them had gone out of business, so they can't even get spare parts anymore. Now, we've got a working wind farm up here on the north part of Oahu, but down on the Big Island, unless it got eaten by the volcano, there's the remains of an abandoned wind farm down there that just didn't work on out. I'm hoping they're going to be able to restart Hawaii's geothermal plant because that would generate electricity. Everybody's all worried about the environment here, but you're right. There is an environmental cost to producing solar cells. There's an environmental cost to producing the windmills. And as far as ethanol is concerned, it sounded really good when it came on out, but it's not carbon neutral, because when you factor in the processing of the plant matter to produce the ethanol, it actually has its own carbon footprint. And because there is less chemical energy in ethanol than there is in gasoline, you have to buy and burn more of it to get the same amount of work out of your vehicle. And there is that issue, of course, that the ethanol is bad for the fuel system on older cars. And now they want to go to E15, ethanol gasoline. The instruction manual on my newer car says 10 at top. And there are actually car manufacturers out there, major car manufacturers, who say in the warranty, if you put ethanol gasoline in this, the warranty on your engine is void. I mean, that's how serious a problem this is.
Yeah. I did an experiment a while back with some with ethanol, and it's very unscientific, but they gave me a Dodge that was an E85, so it could run on E85. I was working in North Dakota at the time, and I went ahead and I ran it on. I ran it from where I was at to Williston, North Dakota, on regular E10, and everything was neutral. Everything was good. The elevation was the same. There's, of course, been to North Dakota. There is no elevation. It's flat, and when I got up there, I filled up with the E85 because it was available in Williston, North Dakota. I don't know if it still is or not. And I filled up with that. And when I came back, I got 9 miles out of the gallon out of that truck. I was getting 20 with the regular gasoline. Now, I paid 20 cents a gallon less. But if you start figuring in the loss of mileage on it, I was paying more and using more fuel consumption to get the same amount of the same amount of distance out of it.
And you're having to stop more often at the fueling stations.
Well, right, and they bring up the point. Well, Brazil uses it, but you know what? Brazil uses sugar cane to produce their ethanol, and they use manual labor and horses. So there is no energy loss producing the ethanol because it's I won't say slave labor, but it's manual labor. They're not using automation like we use here in the United States. So again, guys, I know people are really down on this industry, but you got to understand, from the roads that you drive on to the clothes that you wear to the plastics and stuff in your car to the filters for kidney transplant people, it's all gasoline. It's all petroleum. We're going to have to deal with it for a while. I would love to see a substitute, but right now there's there's just nothing out there that can do it right now.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything on the horizon, and that's that's the big problem. You've got all these people standing up like Governor Jerry Brown and saying we must have alternative energy. What are you thinking, Jerry? We're going to drive a pipe down into the Yellowstone supervolcano and set up a geothermal plant for the United States there? Technically
right,
possible.
And I think that we're going to have to face reality, and I'm not a fan of nuclear. I don't like nuclear. I don't want nuclear in my background or in my backyard. But, with nuclear, it's decent if there's safeguards put in. I'm not sure I trust General Electric to be building my nuclear reactors after Fukushima, but I think there's a combination. One of the other things, I'll tell you right now out here in West Texas, most of the natural gas is being burned off. We're just burning it.
Yeah.
Right on the site. They put up a big thing called a matchstick and burn it because people are so anti-pipeline, and the car companies will not put out, the propane or the natural gas running vehicles, and it's just being wasted. It's a wasted energy resource.
Yes.
People need to be more friendly towards that stuff, So anyhow, I just want to throw my 2 cents in, Michael, and I'm an avid listener, and I think tonight I'll go ahead and donate a little bit of money to you guys. I know you're running on an empty budget. So.
Yeah, we are. Thank you very much for the donation and for the kind words. And, we ought to look at fusion power. A lot of places are tantalizingly close to actually making it workable and practical. It doesn't have anywhere near the downside or toxic waste products of fission reactors or thorium cycle reactors. And if the U.S. government, instead of trying to invade all these other oil-producing nations, had invested that same money in thorium cycle reactors or fusion reactors, we would have a technology the rest of the world would be beating on our doors to buy. It's another example of short-sightedness. Okay, before we go back to the phones here, I just got an email. I'm reminded of an experiment years ago that put a little boy and a little girl in a room with a baby carriage. The girl took the baby doll out of the carriage and played with it. The boy turned the buggy upside down and started to take the wheels off. Boys will be boys and girls will be girls. Okay, Jeff in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Wow, I'm just really upset with all this idiocy sweeping our country today.
I agree.
Specifically the politicians and, the mainstream media. You listen to them and then you listen to the alternative media. And it's like, well, what's the answer to this? Because there's insanity sweeping this country. What do you think the answer is to this?
Absolutely. And I don't know if it's all the antidepressants that are out there. And we've reached a point now where there's so many antidepressants out there that even people who don't take antidepressants are being exposed to them through the drinking water.
Yeah, well, I'm not really so concerned about that because I drink the water, and it's just like this political stuff that's going on in this country. I mean, when will it be enough that we put these people in their place before they just totally destroy our country? When will it be enough?
I don't know, but again, I don't advocate a violent overthrow or a revolution. I still think it's tearing itself apart.
And legalities involved. Yeah, I understand that.
I think the government is tearing itself apart, and I think we got a window into that process during the Kavanaugh hearings. Anyway, listen, I'm going to let you go. All of a sudden, the phone lines are loaded up, and I'm going to try to get to everybody before the end of the program. So let's switch over to James in South Carolina.
Thank you so much. It was obviously too delicate a subject to converse with you.
Okay, James in South Carolina, are you there? Okay, James in South Carolina, are you there? I guess we lost him. All right, so let's switch over to Mateus in Canada. Hello.
I'm here.
Okay, there. All right, we got our phones sorted out here now.
I am James in South Carolina. Who are you?
Well, I'm the host of this radio show, Michael Rivero, and yeah, all I can tell you is hunker down because you're about to get another big storm come over.
Okay. Now I'm looking at it coming now. I got a question. You're talking about automation, and that's a bad thing. I mean, it can be, but suppose automation heightens productivity, and instead of a 40-hour week, people start working 20-hour weeks or 30-hour weeks. And
well,
I think that's
if they're still getting the same money, okay, I mean, automation working together with workers is a good thing. But when automation displaces workers, again, if people are not able to earn decent wages and salaries, they're not going to have the money to go into the stores and buy those products, regardless of whether they're made by humans or robots.
Well, but if the productivity increases, and it might with automation.
What good is productivity without consumption?
Well, if productivity increases, you can drop the number of hours that people work. More people can work.
You're not hearing me. You're not hearing me. What good is increasing productivity if consumption is not increasing alongside it?
Well, what I'm saying is, if you increase productivity, you will make enough so that people will buy. It will be cheaper. Things will be cheaper. People will be able to afford them. You can drop the number of hours, and more people can work. Now, ultimately, I suppose the ultimate goal of automation is to do away with all work. I don't know.
Well, I mean, if you take it to that extreme,
it does seem to me possible that everybody once worked 60 hours. People on farms worked 14-hour days in the summertime and all like that.
Yep.
And now they don't. And it does seem to me that you can envision a technological situation in which people do not work as much and their productivity is high. If you have a situation with the printers, the 3D printers or something like that, at some point such things will be around and people can make what they need. You can envision technological solutions so that adept people, anyway, can create what they need themselves.
Well,
it seems to me.
There are all kinds of technological possibilities out there, and they're all very alluring, but we have to also weigh in the economic and sociological impacts of bringing those technologies forward. There's lots of things that we can be doing or can do. We have to ask, should we do them? Is it really going to be better for the general population if we move forward in this direction? And again, I get back to that same thing. If ordinary people are not allowed to earn decent wages and salaries, they're not going to go into the shopping malls, they're not going to buy the products that are being made by the robots, and all that increased productivity is going to be totally meaningless because it's all going to wind up in a landfill. Look at all the shopping malls that have closed across the United States. Look at all the iconic retailers that have vanished or are in the process of vanishing. The economy is very much unbalanced. And I love the idea of automation, working together with people, but we have to get people back to work. We have to find some way of creating a new industry of some kind that people are going to get involved with. Anyway, James, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercial.
Thank you, Michael.
All right. And I'm going to apologize right now. I'm probably not going to be able to get to all the callers waiting on the line, but we'll give it our best shot when we come back. Aloha America, welcome back to our show, last segment of our program today here, and I'm not going to be able to get to all the callers. Let's start with Mateus in Canada. Mateus, what's on your mind?
Okay, how about I just go through point form of some things and I'll hang up and we can discuss them some other time.
Okay.
True News is he's a Christian, but other than that, it sounds like your show, so great place, especially for someone of the faith. His take on the Kavanaugh is that it's largely about abortion. That the liberals are afraid when Kavanaugh gets in, there's a possibility of abortion laws being affected one day. And his take on abortion is that it's a blood sacrifice to Satan, basically, which makes me think of that satanic statue I called in about that does have the breasts on it and the animal head and feet, which is kind of the liberal agenda of transgender and this whole like mixing up the natural creation and like genetically modifying the organism. And then it makes me think of this Jewish tradition of circumcision and then sucking the blood with the mouth of the baby penis. Is that some strange combination of a blood ritual and like pedophilia mixed together? And then I have an epiphany. I had an epiphany the other day that, wait a second, the church is like a gay club. It just all made sense all of a sudden because there's this, the gays were not allowed to be out of the closet in the past. And so they actually formed communities of secret acceptance inside the church. And then, unfortunately, there just seems to be like a bit of a higher rate of pedophilia with gay men than otherwise. And so that's why there's just an increased amount of pedophilia in the church. And the whole thing about not being allowed to marry, that's not because they want to marry. This is because they're gay. They don't want to marry.
No.
It's never been
the prohibition on marriage, the celibacy issue was all about money. Anyway, listen, Mateus, I'm going to let you go. We got one caller remaining. I'm going to try and get him on the air here. Let's switch over to Daniel in British Columbia. Aloha, Daniel. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I probably don't have time to go into my subject here about the mortgage-backed securities, but I was going to add something about your global warming. The UN report,
yes,
that did make its way to the CBC here in Canada. It's all over the place, and it's to me it seems like the just in time for the election in the United States, the by-election. Scare these liberals into getting to the polls before Trump ruins the world and all that. And there's one extra point that I learned from you. There was a report that a lot of these climate or temperature gauges were near airport runways.
Yes,
right next to the exhaust nozzles of jets. So I thought I'd add that.
Yeah, well, I have that in my article on ClimateGate as well, and yeah, it's you're right. This may be timed to the midterm elections to try and grab global warming as an election issue, because the Democrats don't have a whole heck of a lot else to run on. So thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we should be coming up here on our closing music right about now. There it is. So please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. And please take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know, talk to them, email them, fax them if you need to. Social media is just totally worthless for anything except cute kitten videos. And please donate to Republic Broadcasting. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.